We're now going to move on to some questions to the panel. If you want to come in and sit down, guys, you're more than welcome to fill the room up a little bit. I know some people are still at the bar or have left. I think what we will do, I'll make an executive decision that we might try and focus on questions in the room, and then we'll go to those online later because I'm conscious of time. So, has anybody got anything they'd like to pose to the panel? Who would like to go first? Yes, at the back. I'll come over with the mic. Sorry. Come on, girls. There you go.
Well, first of all, thank you to all the panelists. It's been a really, really enjoyable, interesting evening. I'd like to pick up on what Anita was saying about the horrific hate crime that she was subjected to, and point out that, as well as that, there's a much more subtle thing going on, particularly with walking and rambling. Last year we saw a lot of noise about a group of Asian people walking on that tour, and it wasn't because they were Asian, it was because there was a lot of them. And I'm hearing the same thing where I do a lot of my walking in Salford. People going out for Ramadan walks, and it's not because they're Asian, it's because there's a lot of them. And I think it's something we need to be conscious of. We haven't won these fights about the countryside being there for everybody or the streets being there for everybody. We have to accept that they're not, and we have to continue fighting to make sure that they are.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass that over to Maura, because a gentleman outside in the bar stopped me and mentioned the same thing about the issue that we've had around that.
Yeah, I'm sorry Anita isn't here, because clearly as a white person this isn't my I don't have direct experience. I have the privilege of not having racist abuse, but I hope I'm learning to be a better ally, because I think these things are incredibly important. I think that the whiteness of the countryside and the whitewashing of the countryside are really important. I think it's really linked to quite uncomfortable colonial legacies that we need to unpick. And it's also, frankly, the subtle and not so subtle racism that is in this country and getting worse by the day. And we all need to be ashamed about that, and we all need to do things to amplify voices and support where we can and do what we can. I wish that I had a magic wand to make that better, but two things I was going to say: that my background's in community work before I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to do my PhD a few years ago, and working in Tameside for quite a long time, doing some work on Prevent, which is quite a racist bit of legislation some of you might know about, and a colleague who is Muslim had a walking group then, and the racist abuse he was suffering was just awful. So I wish it was one-off. Of course it isn't. It's incipient, and we need to deal with it. But there is hope, because I think that there is awareness. We need more than awareness. We need action. And there's other people. I've been doing some work in my day job with Salford Environment Movement, which was a Black Men Hiking group. They changed their name to kind of reflect their broader themes, and they're doing great things. I know Maxwell was saying the other day about we need black in the countryside for it to be for everyone. There's other business, but there's Black Girl Hike, the Muslim hikers and such like, and I think it's our responsibility to give them space, which is why I'm weirdly awkward that I'm on the mic now, sorry. Yeah, giving that space, making that space, and actually it's really nice to be on a panel that isn't white and isn't all men, because too often that's the case. So more of that and more support where we can, whether that is in practical terms of money and material resources, or whether it is speaking up when we hear that shit, or whether it's just standing with people when they feel unsafe. There's lots of things we can all do, and I think it's a collective duty. And I will shut up now, because
wonderful. Thank you very much. Another question?
Really, I just wanted to add my thoughts to that debate. Of course, my uncle, or two of my uncles were on that mass trespass. One of them served time in prison, Julius or Judy Klein, as we called him. And of course, a large portion of those young people were Jewish, as were my family, and suffered horrendous racism in the form of anti-Semitism. Despite the fact that they weren't religious, they were very left-wing. My grandfather, my mother, both were involved in the anti-Mosley riots and were fined in courts. And so there's a whole history of racism. It isn't just about black racism. That isn't to say that it isn't a very important issue today. I just wanted to set that context really for that group of people, Benny and all those other people that I grew up with, thinking were part of my extended family, and were, you know, they did go through a lot of problems with racism, and that was part of their wider political struggle. As internationalists, they wanted an fighting war and all of those other things, going to Spain. All the other connections that were within my family were all based, really, coming from that perspective.
Thanks very much. Anyone else in the room? Yep. There you go, Hayley.
First of all, can I say thanks for staying to answer our questions. But one thing that struck me with everything that we were looking at, we're talking about a 90th anniversary, and there was a lot of working class people in the countryside. Now, I don't know, I've been on a couple of walks recently, and I think we're probably the only working class people in the countryside. So how do you activate working class people to get out there and get in the countryside, in particular young people? And you said some great stuff about urban spaces and reclaiming them, but it was just, and I don't expect anyone to have a definitive answer, but it's something that strikes me when I look around the room.
I think it's a really good point. I do also, I have colleagues who work a lot on issues of rural poverty and inequality, and I think I totally hear you that we should be getting out and doing and activating that. But I'm really conscious that the processes in the city of gentrification and whatever are massively problematic in the countryside as well, second homes or whatever, people that aren't living where they're living. And I think it's about, sounds a cliche, but those kind of solidarities that kind of transcend our location actually, that life in the countryside can be pretty shitty for a lot of people, and there's a lot of, you know, poor people there. And that doesn't answer your question, but I just feel that I totally agree that we forget that class is important, and if there's one thing that's happening at the moment is more and more poverty. And I will shut up before I go on about inequality, but I suspect I'm in a room of people that would agree with me.
I mean, I think that one of the things that Benny Rothman never ever gave any indication to make any connection with the trade unions in the countryside. You know, that there was actually a whole load of poverty in the countryside. And they were finding, you know, in the 30s, it would have been lovely common cause to have made, and somehow or other, I think part of this is to do with finding common cause with people in the countryside with their struggles. You see, I mean, it's also a question of the disappearance of public transport in the countryside. It's to do with the disappearance of post offices. You know, it's that sort of transformation, and indeed the loss of housing, because all the incomers and, you know, the countryside, the rural communities are being transformed into sort of, you know, the places where you don't want the working class. You tuck them away around the corner in sort of a few council houses. So I mean, I would love, Don and I were at a meeting in the 1980s where we tried to get this going. We tried to get all the ramblers together with some trade unions. Say, why don't we try and make that connection between those who use the countryside for leisure and recreation and those who use it because they live there, you know, who work there, and who have, again, a different sort of appreciation. So we have to sort of explore those sorts of links, and that means some critical stuff being done with most of the outdoor organisations. And I said that on there.
Thank you, Julie.
One thing that's just reminded me of, which is by no means a solution, but it's a really way of visualizing this, and then can be a talking point. There was an online map that was created, a couple of data sets. I'm sure we can share the link afterwards. It was created by nationally by Friends of the Earth, and they overlaid two sets of data into a really nice visual map. One was about access to green space, and overlaid that with data on kind of inequality data, so income and health, and it is what you expect, and then even worse. But if you need to kind of a reminder, clicking on this map, zooming into your local area, Manchester, it was particularly, if you look there, you see that the areas to the south, quite good access to green space. Go further north, there's lots of, in their colour scheme, green goes to orange and red. So I would recommend checking that out.
Can we have another question?
Sorry, my name's KC for short, as in a Sunshine Band. Isn't this a whole issue really about popularisation of the issue? It strikes me that the whole point about the mass trespass in the beginning was it was a mass movement in that sense, and we need to build that mass again. And the obvious thing is things like social media and so on, but I, for one, am known as Spider-Man. I do stunts. I'm the guy who climbed Big Ben. It just seems to me that we need to broaden our appeal. I'm not being negative. It's great that we've got people here tonight, but this is a relatively small gathering. Mm-hmm. We've got to broaden out. It's too white, it's too middle class. Extinction Rebellion have exactly the same problem. I'm a member of that. Isn't it time that we did something imaginative again to grab the headlines?
I think you said it all there.
Yes. Can I just say one thing about, I totally agree about the need for a mass movement, but I'm also slightly skeptical about huge spectaculars in some ways. I think we need a sustained movement, some of which is quite quiet and boring. It operates on different fronts in different ways and involves lots of people, because those spectacles will be seen in different ways by different people. And I think that we need a massive variety of tactics. But I personally, and I've spent years going on about this, as most of you know, that idea of public space and access and equality is so interlinked with health, well-being, and so many other things. And you can attach it from different ways that, we need to keep going. And so I'm not against those brilliant stunts, but we do need more than that for something to go on for longer, I think. Yeah.
Can I?
Another question at the back, and then we're going to go to the
This is to the old panel. I know it sounds like you've all been really active and you've challenged a lot of things. And I know that we've brought, we've not, but they brought in legislation, which I've been on a few rallies to kill the bill. But a number of years ago, in the beginning of this century, which isn't a nice thing to say really, is that I was a community worker in East Manchester, and the new East Manchester, the New Deal, as it was called. And I remember legislation coming through where they were pushing local residents on council estates to report crimes so that access was not allowed on their estates. So, I mean, that came out in, and ASBOs and stuff like that. How difficult have you found it with the legislation that started under the Labour Party in the beginning of this century up to present day with Kill the Bill, for us to do those mass demonstrations? I ain't climbing up Big Ben. I ain't going to do it. But I'll stand on a street corner and I will, and I will demonstrate. But I'm finding there's a lot of restrictions against us. How are you as activists seeing that, and how have you seen it in the last 22 years, really?
Just to mix it up, I'll pick up. And this also feeds on nicely from what I was going to follow on from Morgag, where I agree that you don't want a sort of peak. Well, we always have peaks and troughs, but you don't want each peak of activity to be followed by big troughs. So yeah, we, and you know, in the group that I'm currently part of, we also do a lot of like really sustained, boring stuff to try and like tie us over to the next peaks. That's just to echo that. In terms of legislation, you have to use what's available to it whilst it's available, and never take anything for granted. So I think that's true with that's what the Kill the Bill protests would say. There were people there who perhaps that was the first time that they'd come out on a protest. So yeah, use it while you can. I think as well that I assume that it's always going to be harder, but don't I'm not looking for this kind of time when everything's going to kind of suddenly open up and become easier. We have even a tool that we use quite a lot, which is the Freedom of Information Act. Was that's still relatively new in 2000. Tony Blair called it his biggest mistake. He may have been forgotten about some other ones, but even that now seems to have been under threat again. There's some new research by Open Democracy which is showing even that's getting eroded away. So the more we can to use anything that's available to us, so that we don't lose it.
Hand over to, is it Les?
Okay, a very quick comment and a question, and not wanting to get on the wrong side here. The question is going to be about the here and the future. But the reflective comment really is, first of all, thank you very much for giving up your time and putting forward some very provocative ideas about kind of like how we might kind of engage in the countryside. And how we might be able to do politics by another means. I was particularly pleased to hear the role of the British Workers' Sports Association mentioned as pivotal in the actual in the trespass, because I think that what they were able to do was to fast track what the Ramblers had failed to do for a number of years. And that the reason why I believe that that was the case, and this kind of really in a way kind of relates back to a comment that Dave was making before about the disconnect today in comparison. And the simple thing for me is because there was class consciousness amongst those people who went to the countryside and wanted to use the countryside, whether or not it was for walking, hiking or cycling, whatever it might have been. There was a class consciousness about that we don't see today. And that's where I think the disconnect is with a number of well-meaning groups that don't really manage to penetrate and make the advances that were made at that time and fast track some of that land reform that we saw at the time. The question though, Oliver, is really if each of the panelists had one priority that they would encourage people to engage with, to be able to use the countryside and to raise the profile of the right to roam, what would that be?
Thanks, Les.
All right. Okay. I guess I'm going to go first and be really shameless in this. And I said it's no disrespect to the countryside. It's just that I, as a Crip, I don't get there very often, and I am really interested in those bits of green space, and particularly along our canals and rivers that everyone can use. So very short term, can you please get involved with letters, whatever, around Raleigh Quays when that happens, because I think we've got a really real chance of winning this one, and it would be really good symbolic way of going, actually, this towpath, that we've got all kinds of evidence, there's been all kinds of shenanigans going on with the with Salford Council and various things. Basically, really good example. You can say, actually, please don't steal this 300-year-old path. That is really important. We know green space, mental health, well-being, environmental sustainability, all those things. Don't give it to a hotel, please. So that's a real local one. And forgive my shamelessness, but as it's on our doorstep, we're talking about now, please come and give me your address or take a postcard off me and get involved in that. And I hope that Don and Gloria might add something to that in a bit as well.
I've got just one, so I'm going to slightly cheat and give two. One is to it's again like more about urbans. One of the reasons why right to roam it isn't properly enforced is the lack of kind of transparency about land. And this is true of anything where people in power are trying to hide things. If it's complicated, difficult, expensive, we're not going to understand it or change it. And that's very true of land. So one way we can do it is to kind of better map and log and have like publicly available records of what we own. Shouldn't be saying this in some ways in Manchester, but Liverpool is ahead of us in that respect. Yeah. Surprisingly enough, Manchester isn't always first or best or different. So Liverpool has a land commission up and running. Didn't take that long to do. It's not finished, but got it up and running quite a way during a time of, during a pandemic and during a time of political turbulence. So Andy Burnham has it in his manifesto. Somewhere buried. He's expecting you won't read it through, and he's expecting there'll be a lot more high-profile stuff, so that he'll kind of coast through the next few years, and everybody will forget that he promised the land commission for Greater Manchester. So keep hassling him about that at any opportunity. He does he's not too difficult to reach on the airwaves. So keep up the pressure for that promise for a Greater Manchester Land Commission. That's the first one. And then my second one was just sneak in that let's not forget kind of creative ways of kind of doing, whether it's taking a photograph, making sure that right for him isn't just something that's kind of about legislation, and not to lose sight of the other things that we can do. You can sketch, you can photograph, you can sing there, and just make sure we still have a bit of fun and imaginativity and creativity in it as well.
Can I just jump back and say an answer to the question before about what you can get away with? It is surprising how much you can get away with. Like our work, or the LOM has always said that we're open to everyone, because we know a lot of people don't want to get arrested and can't afford to for caring, or various reasons that you're not able to go to do that. And again, that's related to class. I think there's a certain privilege about who can take time off work and responsibilities to sit in prison sometimes. So one example, I think that playfulness, I think using space is really important. But one example, we have a game called CCTV Bingo, and it's fun in the countryside. It's slightly different. You have a bit of variation looking for hunting things as well. But anyway, it's not illegal to take a picture of a CCTV camera, for example. It's absolutely fine. And doing it and being curious and just getting out and doing stuff, whatever. Just go for a walk, I think, is the most important thing. And I don't want to say you must have fun. You might have a really shitty time. It could be raining and you could be hungry or whatever, but just do it.
I'm an old lefty. And I class struggle, and I came here really to sort of say, we've had our day, and we might not have really got far. I think the one thing that I would say needs to happen, on all those slides, the thing that really worries me most is that tucked away at the bottom of the thing about law is possessive individualism. I don't mind what you do or what anyone does, but it has to be collective. Somehow or other, what needs to be gotten through is that these are common activities. It has to be, we can do all sorts of individual things, but somehow or other, I think we've got to recover a sense of collectivity. And I don't really mind what the action is, and I'll be quite happily join those who are activists, tell me what to do, as long as it's collective and I'm not having to just do my individual thing for my individual campaign. And
That's such a refreshing
Yes.
starting point.
It really is. And can I add on to that as well? I think a lot of the time, because of this shitty neoliberal world we live in, we're encouraged to be scared of each other, and you know, racism's part of that, and all kinds of things. It's like actually talking to people and learning and listening. Says she who's hogged the mic, but you know, there's things to do actually, and just doing them and knowing we make some mistakes, but doing them with a good heart and a collective mindset, because that common treasury stuff is really important, and we'll lose it if we don't use it. Absolutely, because people want to take it off us, you know. It's the old, yeah, I'll shut up now. But
Thank you there to the panel. I'm just going to pass the mic over here. Conscious that we're pretty short. There you go.
I'm Don Lee, and I've been campaigning for footpaths and rights of way for 60 years. In a couple of months anyway. And the reason I was brought into it was I was set upon by a farmer and his dog to walk the footpath near the Flying Park. And that caused me to be an obsessive footpath campaigner, rights of way campaigner. But I'm not talking about the past, I don't ever do that. And what I'm talking about is the present. And we've got this particularly virulent application of the old Mersey and Irwell navigation towpath. This is 300 years old. And this goes all the way from Bridge Street, from the borders of Manchester and Salford, and you all know it, down to Salford Quays and so on, all the way beyond it, wherever you want to walk. And Salford Council and Legal and General Pension Fund, between them, want to close this footpath. No better reason that they want to privatise it. Now, that, to my way of thinking, is totally wrong. We've got, Morgag campaigned, and she's got a very good website on this one. But if you want to look at Raleigh Quays, R-A-L-L-I, Raleigh Quays, and River Irwell towpath, you'll get all the story there. What we want, we've got over 100 people objecting here, which is quite a lot when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm hoping for public inquiry, and then the dirt will fly, I can tell you. And I've got some questions to ask. And there's some dirty work afoot here. Some deliberate obscurities have come forward, and the public are being conned. Don't you agree, Morgag?
there's definite shenanigans.
Well, we're going to show them, I tell you. And it all starts, I mean, you might want to know how Benny and me met, and it was because of a little footpath near Benny, called the Boggart footpath it was. And again, the footpath is led from the council estate to a private estate. And it was well used by the council people, not so much by the private people. Who wants to close it? The private people want to close it. Well, I had a letter, put a letter in the then Altrincham Guardian, and Benny picked up on this. I'd heard about Benny Rock from the university. He wrote to me, got in touch with me, and we became friends. Since then, we decided, it was before 1982, so we decided that it was a good idea, with people like you did, that we should celebrate 50 years from mass trespass, which is what's happened. And here we are, 40 years later, in the 90s, doing it again. But, you know, we had one great win only two months ago, and it's not been publicised very much. And it was the government were determined, and it was a Labour government that set this in motion, to close what's called the definitive rights of way map in 2026. Some of you may know about this, some of you may not do. And the government have collapsed on this particular item. It's not going to happen anymore, and therefore the big trouble that the environmental people have to get all the evidence in before 2026. Sounds a long time, it's not. Anyway, that's been put on hold. No, it's been cancelled by the government now. It will not happen. So we're all right. And it's funny because there are people in the know. Some people know about this. A lot of people don't. I'm going to finish now because I know we're running out of time. But I must admit that this campaign that Morgag and myself started, it's going very well. We want more people to be involved. I'll say, go and look at the website, make your own mind up. I'm not going to prejudge you on this one. And then, if you agree with things, get in touch with Morgag's website, and we'll win this one. We will.
I'm optimistic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And if we don't win, then there's actually, I think we always learn a lot from things we don't always win, and it will be the worst symbol of excess and gentrification and social cleansing that we can use for other purposes. But we'll win, so that doesn't matter.
I'm very sad to say we've run out of time, and I'm conscious. I don't know if I want to open it up to the panel to maybe Julian to make a little bit of a closing statement about tonight's proceedings before I.
The whole point of this is that, you know, my voice is an old one, it's the historic voice. All I would say is, when Don and I were on the committee with Benny Rothman, there were all sorts of political types there. There were a couple of SWP rock climbers from Sheffield who were continually wanting to sort of shout out Benny Rothman being a Communist Party member. There was
SWP for you.
Labour camp. There was Martin Doughty, the late Martin Doughty, who's just become sort of a county councillor in Derbyshire. And there was us left Labour types trying to do this, and then there was Don, this funny figure Don. So we were all having this sort of left. This, you know, arguing rather in the way in which we did in the left in the early 80s. There's Don, and I thought, he's an anarchist. So whatever I may have said about collectivism, actually do what Don says. And if Don says it and you do it individually, then Don's stuck at it. I think that's.
I work for the Tories sometimes.
Yeah, I know. He's an anarchist.
What are you doing with we have, 56 councils, 55 were Labour and 1 was Conservative. I worked with him and 1 was Pace. There you are.
On a Don.
Well done.
That's showing commitment to diversity and openness now.
We did begin the evening with a beautiful poem by David, and Julian has asked me to read my Right to Roam poem. I was commissioned to write this by the Working Class Movement Library, and went in there feeling like a bit of a charlatan, really. There were 2 guys sat opposite me, and one was reading the Civil War diaries of a guy from Cheetham Hill who went to fight in the Spanish Civil War, and the other guy was reading the Caliban Shrieks by Jack Hilton, and they both went, "What are you doing?" And I went, "I'm writing a poem," and I felt a bit ashamed. But I sat with Benny's child defence notes, which was a real privilege to do in the library, in the reading room there. And yeah, this poem was the result. And leaving the landscape of your scrawled page, I turned left out of yonder gate, where the moor floods the mind, mythic with purple heathers and dark rock pools of time, and a mermaid with all her common majesty grants us both immortality. And when the darkness tried to own the light, to keep for itself in the private night, the stars came out to trespass the sky and burn witness to the lie. And if this poem were a 6-penny Woolworths map, and this compass needle a single blade of grass, quietly protesting between 2 cobblestones, but calling to you the right to roam, for all that is free can never be owned. And when the darkness tried to own the light, to keep for itself in the private night, the stars came out to trespass the sky and burn witness to the lie. And yours is the whisper that picks the lock, to Kinder Scout from the Edale Cross. Walking freely in your waking loss, I marvel at this view from the top. The wind farm's mass crucifixion, and there in the middle distance, 10,000 souls on Winter Hill. Freedom walks where freedom will. And when the darkness tried to own the light, to keep for itself in the private night, the stars came out to trespass the sky and burned witness to the lie. Thank you.